Jamie from Inky and Scrappy, sharing with you today some real-time coloring of my color map for my upcoming Inky and Scrappy, or Brewing Up Creativity with Inky and Scrappy, sharing how I color my images on that Lawn Fawn Ugly and Bright stamp set using Ohuhu bullet nib markers. Keep in mind you can do, either way, you can do these with Copics, any of your alcohol-based markers. Alcohol markers have a blending quality that you won't find in some of the other ones. To me, paper is super important. I am using Express It cardstock here, or blending cardstock, for my images. I did pick up some Ohuhu marker cardstock or blending cardstock, and I will be trying that out in the next couple of weeks, and I will let you know my thoughts on that one because it is a lot cheaper to buy theirs, so I will see if I like it blending wise as much as I like the Express It cardstock. I've used Express It cardstock for probably about 15 to 17 years now, and so it's just what I know and what I love. So I do absolutely enjoy coloring on it. You can let your marker dry and come back and re-wet it, and it'll blend just like it did before. So if that helps. So after I'm all done with my card class on Tuesday night this week, I will be going back in and coloring those first two images on this one because I'm not going to waste my time or waste the time that I spent coloring them and not use the images. So I will definitely go back, re-wet it, and blend it out. I'll let you know if it works because it's been drying for a good week now. So I go in with my darkest shade here, and I'm just laying in where I want that shadow. Keep in mind you can always come back with the darker shade. I start with my darkest and go to my lightest. You can totally do all of it light to get that first base down, and then go in with your medium and dark, and then go over everything with your light. So the light is going to blend it out a little bit more or make it lighter. So if you want to lighten something up, go over it with your lighter marker. If you want to keep it darker, you can always go over it with a second layer of dark to give it some more contrast. And especially if you're looking for that color pop kind of coloring where you have a definite shadow in there. I don't know how else to, I think it's color pop. Yeah, color pop art where you have like a definite line shadow. I like the blended look. Sometimes I go for the line look. It's totally up to you what you want to do. I would suggest just plain. Coloring takes time and effort to learn. And so as you continue on with your journey of coloring, you'll get better. It's all comes with practice and time. So if yours doesn't look like mine does at the finished line, that's fine. It's all in personal preference and practice. Practice makes, I guess, us better at a lot of things. So I'm going in with my lighter tone. I kept this one fairly simple. I wanted to just use two tones for my marker blends on this one. By going in with that lightest shade one time, I'm going to get a different blend than when I go over it. Now I'm going over it a second time. So the one that has the first layer is going to darken up some after I add that second layer on top, but it's going to be lighter where I don't have any shading already there, if that makes sense. I don't know. And it'll dry back lighter than it looks when it's wet. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to learn that, and so don't feel bad if it's like super dark. It will slowly lighten up as it dries a little bit, and you can always go back later and add another dark layer on top if it's not dark enough. So I'm just going in and laying in my next colors. So I will go over the colors here. So for my deer, I did E342 and or 92 if you're going with the older style of bullet nib markers. And then for my light brown here, I am just using number E763 and or 103. if you're going with the older ones. For my lighter tone on that dark brown, I went in with an E460 or number 96 for those bullet nib numbers. I do think I have a comparable one for Copics on my reindeer. If I can find it, I will add it onto my blog post. So if you color with Copics and you want that color combo, I think I figured it out for Kate. And so I will look that one up. I'm pretty sure it's on one of my color swatches somewhere. So I just went with a super simple color scheme here, super simple markers. So I only did that one shade in my darker shade. As trying to figure out marker coloring for class is a little bit more difficult than just for YouTube channel, because I have to make sure that I have enough markers for everyone to use. I don't, so we're going to end up sharing markers and going in different, so I wanted to keep it fairly simple. I like coloring with multiples, and so it was definitely trying for me because I haven't actually done 1 and 2 shade marker blends for a long while. I usually do about 3, sometimes 4, especially when I'm doing those warm grays and regular gray tones. So, and I went ahead to finish my reindeer on the last one because I really don't do anything different here than I did on that middle one, but I wanted the completed deer on this one. So I don't know, let's see, story time. Let's see. It's been a rough few weeks, and hopefully I will be getting back into my YouTube channel, postings. I'm not going to promise more than 1 or 2 videos a week at this point. I really don't know how my creativity is going to pan out. So we will see. So for my bear, I'm going to come in with some warm grays. And so I'm using in old numbers like warm gray 6 and warm gray 4. And then I'm going to bring in a warm gray 2. So old numbers, it is new numbers are warm gray 190 is what I'm going to start with here. And then for my nose or my snout, I'm going to use a warm gray 160 and or warm gray 2. And then for my mid-tone, it's warm gray 170 or warm gray 4 in the older colors. And then for some added, I did do a little pink cheek on the bear at the end here, and I used an E194 or number 27 if you're looking at your older Ohuhu bullet nib markers. So what are your favorite markers to color with? I have done Ohuhus. Well, Ohuhus are newer to me. So in 2020, I bought Ohuhus because I couldn't get Copic refills for my warm grays and my cool grays. And so I looked at buying another set of grays from Copic to get me through until the refills were available. And I had seen a few people post about using the cheaper Ohuhu markers, and I thought, for the amount of money I was going to spend on buying a pack of tonal gray markers from Copics, I could get a full, I think it was like the 200 set of Ohuhu bullet nibs. And so I kind of hemmed and hawed, and I thought, you know what, if I hate them, I hate them, and I can just pass them on. And I turned out really liking them just for the grays. And so I kind of have been playing with them a lot more just because, and I had some issues with my new Copics not being of high quality as my old Copics were. And so I was frustrated with sticking money into a marker that lasted me maybe 6 months and having to replace it because the marker itself was bad. And so I kind of moved over to my Ohuhus. I still use my Copics from time to time. Copics are definitely easier on the color number system, especially if you're just getting started. But if you don't know the difference, it really doesn't matter. I do try to list all of my Ohuhu marker blends on my blog post, so if you're ever looking for that. And I have been getting better about doing color mapping for them. And so if that's something that you're interested in, definitely go check out the blog posts. I do try to keep them up to date when I keep my marker blends written down. I don't always write things down because if I'm coloring in the tractor, it's just not going to happen. So for the bear, going around that outside there kind of gives you that depth and that darkness, and then keeping his tummy a little bit lighter kind of gives you more of that round shape and or image when you're coloring him. I actually sat down this weekend when I was in Chicago and colored for a little while. I colored a whole bunch of bears, so you will see a bear family card coming soon. I've got all my bears colored. I don't have my coordinating images colored yet, so I haven't decided where I'm going with that one. I had an idea when I stamped everything out, so I just need to sit down and finish where my thought process was on that one. But I used from Warm Gray 8 all the way to Warm Gray 2, but I concentrated more Warm Gray 6, 5, and 4. And you'll see those bears coming up, in the next couple of weeks. But so this one was just those 6, 4, and 2. And so these ones end up a little bit lighter than my Chicago colored bears were. But all in all, they did turn out very well. And practicing. So I figured I was going to practice my bear coloring in Chicago because I had that sheet with me. I did have a bunch of sheets with me, but that was the only thing I really got done. And it's kind of soothing and relaxing to me to just sit down and color, work on shading, figuring out where I want the shading, how I want the shadow to fall. Are they going to work on my card? Because I haven't really planned it out. And shading wise, I usually don't worry about where my sun comes in when it comes to making a card and my colored images. Sometimes I'm good about it, but usually I just use what I have on hand. So I have used markers, or alcohol markers. I haven't found much of a difference between them. I wasn't truly impressed with the Hobby Lobby, I think it's Master Touch. Is that what theirs are? I have some of them, but I use them with my Copics, and I guess I have no problem blending alcohol markers with different brands of alcohol markers. They all kind of work the same. Sometimes it just takes an extra layer of color to get the blend you want to get. You have to work the blend a little bit more to get them to blend well. So I would do what's in your price range, what's in your, your wheelhouse, I guess. And if you're new to them, picking up a set of Ohuhus, you don't even have to do the 3. I have full set syndrome, so I had to buy the 320 set when it came out. I'm not sad that I did. It gives me a lot of color choices. Their 200 set has a lot of grays. So if you like gray, or you're just looking at adding to your grays, that 200 set has a wide array. The 320 set has an even wider array. Red grays, green grays, yellow grays, warm grays, cool grays, neutral grays. So neutral, I would say, is probably your tonal gray in your Copics. And then it's just a matter of color swatching everything out. So I did do all of my color swatching I did the full 320 on a sheet of paper, and then I just kind of picked, and it took me probably 3 days, not full days, but 3 days to sit down and figure out where my colors kind of laid in the color scheme of things. So I took all of my blue ones and kind of looked at the colors and kind of figured out where they went together. And it just makes my color mapping easier when I sit down to figure out new color blends, which ones kind of have similar tones to them. For my bear, I just went in here with some dot detail in a darker tone. So I'm using the Warm Gray first, and then I will come back in with the Warm Gray 6 to add a little bit more of that fur, I guess. It just gives it a little bit of a texture. You don't have to do this step. I just wanted to show how I got some of that texture on, or how the texture looks on the bear. And if you don't like it, if it's too dark, go back over it with that lighter tone and it'll blend it back in a little bit more and you won't see quite as heavy of a texture there. But keep in mind, it does dry back quite a bit, because on my finished one, you can't see it nearly as good as you can when it's wet there. Oh, maybe it's because I went back in with another layer. I didn't like my blend on the top. It kind of looked like it had a definite line there. So I just went back in with another layer to blend it a little bit better. And for my fox, because I didn't fit all 3 foxes on there, I'm only going to do a little bit of blending on the one, and then I will kind of do what I did on that third one all in the second one. And I ended up going with some red tone browns. So I want to say these are like an E50. I think the E50s or the E30s have a red tone to them. I can't remember when you're looking at Copics. So for the Ohuhus, I show you 3 here, and I don't actually end up using that one tone. So I ended up using an E769. In the new number, old number is 94, and then an E558, new number, and 149, old number. And then for that lightest tone on the fox, I end up using an E287 and 97 in that old tone. So this one shows 21, which would definitely work in there if you wanted to. It's going to give you a different blend though. So it's not what I ended up using, but you could definitely use that one. I will post on my blog post, because I actually have 4 shades there that would work together, and that's where that 21 comes in. It was my lightest shade on my brown, and I didn't end up using it. I used the one under that, or darker than that, which was that 149 color. So if you wanted a little bit lighter fox, you could definitely bring in that 21, which is that E679. And again, I'm just going to go in with my darkest tones here, lay down my shadows, kind of doing that line underneath the belly there. It definitely gives the belly some shape and breaks up the legs from the body of the fox. And then making sure to do the shadow underneath the tail. So when you're putting shadows in on an image, think about where parts touch the body or meet the body are going to be laying in front of things. So that armpit area along the outside, the tail along the body is going to be darker than what's out in the open because the light's going to hit it more. So if that helps with, that's how I lay down shadows or try to lay down shadows. And sometimes it doesn't work for me and I end up redoing it. The best thing about the alcohol markers is usually you can lighten up something if you don't really like it. Going in with a lighter shade and pulling that color back, pushing that color back. So really it pushes the color back. Kind of like the colorless blender. When you're looking at a colorless blender on Copics or on Ohuhus, your colorless blender is kind of like a color eraser. But it's not really an eraser. It's like a pusher. So it's going to push that alcohol ink further back or further into the paper. So it'll lighten it up on top and it'll push the color deeper into the paper so you're not going to see it as much. So it's not necessarily like whiteout, but it'll help you to blend in. And so when I first started coloring with Copics, I had gotten like an instructional book that kind of said, oh, take that alcohol, that blending marker and wet down your whole image with that before you start adding color because it wets the paper. So it's an extra step. So if you want to, if you struggle with blending stuff, that's one way to do it because you're not going to add more color on top. If you add too much color, you might get some bleeding. Using that colorless blender will help push it back into the lines a little bit. It all takes practice. So you know, and you can do some tip to tip. I really didn't do tip to tip technique until I got my Ohuhus because I was so worried about ruining my Copic nibs or, you know, switching them. I also had, which ones did I get? I got the chameleon markers I had a set of chameleon markers for a little while. I handed them down to my niece and she plays with them now, but those were probably the first ones that I did some of that tip to tip stuff with because they have that colorless blender in there and that's how they get the lighter tone. So if you don't have a lighter tone that you want, you can definitely do a tip to tip with your colorless blender onto your marker or your marker onto your colorless blender and then blend it out. Practice on paper without doing it on an image to see how it works, how many seconds. So I used to do the chameleon markers like a 5-second. I would count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the tip to tip on their, because their caps used to have like a colorless blender in them. And then I would count, but then you had to color backwards, which was awkward to me because I had always done it the other way around. And so it took a little bit more practice on my part to do it with the chameleon markers, but it's, you know, it's all just takes time and practice. And so if it doesn't turn out the first time, just keep practicing, keep working on that blending and those colorings. Watching other people color really helps a lot for me too, especially when I'm practicing a new medium like Zig water brush markers and those things. Watching other people and how they color and get their blends, it helps to fine tune your method, I guess, or your experience. And to me, paper is probably almost more important than my medium that I'm working with. Because if you're not using the right paper, it's not going to blend and it's not going to do the same thing that some of those experts in the field have great luck with. And I'm no expert at anything. I just do what looks good to me and what works for me. So making sure you have proper paper is very important. And I'm notorious for buying the cheap knockoff stuff that's going to give me the same look because I'd rather spend my money on new stamp sets and pretty things. And now we get to that coloring of the sweater. To me, if you want to get that round, because it's going to be round shape, putting those darker tones into that armpit area and along the sides of the sweater are going to give you the greatest rounding of that sweater shape. And this one you can do any color you want. So reds, greens, blues, whatever you're looking for on the sweater, it's all going to be around the same coloring for the most part. And I do decide to actually come up a little bit further with my red there and give it a little bit more of a tone there to extend it a little bit here. So let's see. So Lawn Fawn has new stuff out. I haven't gotten my order yet from Crescent Creations. It should be in the mailbox either today or tomorrow. So I'm kind of excited to play with that stuff. I'm not really in a Christmas mood, so hopefully getting some new stamps that aren't Christmas will definitely help that creative juices flowing. I'm excited about the beavers, and then of course I'm excited about the new Build a Log Cabin because I've got some ideas for that one, and so I'm pretty sure that will be my next Crescent Creations design team make will be with those items. I think I am set to go up on their YouTube channel on Wednesday. Is it the 28th? It's the Wednesday before the end of the year. So watch for that one. I haven't created anything yet, so it'll be an all new with all new stuff card. I'm trying to think what else I've got going on. I have class tomorrow night for my Create with Inky and Brewing Up Creativity with Inky and Scrappy. And that one has been pushed around a little bit, so weather and funeral stuff, so I had to move it for the funeral in Chicago, and then it ended up, we had like rain and it froze and stuff here in Minnesota, so I had to push back to the following week. So that one is on Tuesday night. and we're doing Christmas ornaments and stuff. So I will do a live probably tomorrow during the day before I have class. And then I'm going to try to get some of those real-time videos up again before Christmas because they're all Christmassy themed, except for the one, you could also use that one for Valentine's Day. So other than that, I'm hoping to get back into crafty stuff. I mean, my crafting room is still semi-clean because I haven't been home very much the last 3 weeks. I have to work on some items for my January card class, which I'm thinking I'm going to do birthday on that one. Maybe using that Simon Says Stamp downhill, or that Simon Says Stamp special set. I might have a giveaway coming up because I might have an extra one of just the stamp set. And I have my February class to do too, which will be some Valentine stuff. So those are all going to be in the works for January. And hopefully I will get on here a little bit more in the next couple of weeks. But thank you so much for tuning in. I hope I didn't bore you to death today and keep getting